people living our lives. We're people, just people, and we're glad to be alive.
Welcome to We're People First, the Jeff Moyer Show. Here's Christy Moyer.
Hello, everyone. We are so excited that you're here with us in Southern California, San Diego, to be exact. What you see here is Jeff's home studio, and I'm going to be giving you an audio description of that. I do want to say a few things first. We've gone to great lengths to make the show accessible. We are still working out a few kinks, and we will appreciate your patience with that. But we are certainly giving it our best. So what I'm going to do now is have Jeff come to the chair here, and I'm going to move so he can join me. Jeff? What, baby?
Introduce me.
Here comes Jeff Moyer. Now, Jeff Moyer has been introduced by many people, and I'm going to leave the camera now, and you're going to see him, but you will hear my voice throughout the show. Being that Jeff is blind, it's very hard for him to acclimate to a strange environment like this. He's used to having people in the audience giving him some kind of feedback. So I'm going to be a voice in the background. So honey, look at the camera.
I will. I'm looking at you with that beautiful introduction.
I see that. I'm going to say one more thing. As I said, Jeff's been introduced by many people. I've heard lots of introductions from, here's a man that needs no introduction. And I know there's a lot of our friends out there watching us right now, and you know a lot about Jeff, but I will guarantee you this. You're going to learn something new, because as we were preparing for this, I learned something new about Jeff. So there's a lot to know. But I do want to pass over a quote from Keanu Reeves, and you can look up the whole quote. I'm going to bleep out one word. Keanu says, quote, "If you've been brutally broken, but still have the courage to be gentle to other living beings, then you are a bleep with the heart of an angel."
A bad bleep with the heart of an angel.
And Jeff is that. He has had adversity in his life. He has risen above it, and he's gentle with all other living things. So he does have the heart of an angel. My husband, Jeff.
Thank you, sweetheart. What an incredible honor to be here. And thank you all for being with us. You know, I went to splash cold water in my face, and I should really put my glasses on. You know, oddly, it's odd to me, although I'm blind, my brain requires refract my prescription lenses, like you wear prescription lenses or contacts. And I wear these red glasses because they protect my eyes from the light that hurts. I'm highly light sensitive, and this color protects my eyes from the glare that's created by shortwave blue light and infrared light, or ultraviolet light. And you know, I should put on my hearing aids too. Darn it.
It would help.
Yeah, I took them out to wash my face. Oh, that's much better.
There's one.
Yeah, there's the other one. Now, you know, as long as I'm not playing an instrument, really what I should do for my hand's sake, I have the most common industrial injury is injury to the hands. And I overdid it with my hands 30 years ago. And I have, what's it called? Severe tendonitis. So these compression gloves really help. So now, you know, I'm sitting in this standard desk chair, but ordinarily my preference would be to be in my reclining wheelchair, because I gave a kidney in 2010, and then there was an attack on my life. And the result was that I live with severe and chronic pain, as do 115 million Americans live with pain. Probably, hopefully not severe. but live with chronic pain. So if you were in the mall and you saw some old codger with obviously blind, maybe he had a Braille book, fussing with his hearing aids, who happened to be using a wheelchair for mobility, you might look at that guy and say, poor fella. Don't look at me and say, poor fella, and really don't look at anyone with that attitude just because you see something about us. I will tell you about myself that I live an extremely engaged and interesting life. And what this show is doing is putting me back in the game of public service. That's what we hope this show will be.
So, Jeff, I want you to give the audience an arc of your life.
The arc of my life. Well, that's
when you were born in 1949.
In 1949, when I was born, I was normally sighted, born into a family, my sister 2 years older. And when I was 5 years old, I developed a severe case of the measles. And immediately following that, I knew that I had begun, I didn't know anything about beginning. I knew I couldn't see like I had. I just chalked it up to something I didn't understand. And 2 weeks later, my brother was born with what I today call a severe cognitive disability. In the day, it was called mental retardation.
Okay, tell us about that first decade of life in your family, other than this.
Okay, well, in the 50s, my house that I grew up in was filled with music. And I saw music as a way to bring communities together. My parents would have people over and they would sing. We would do the dishes, we would sing. We'd go for a road trip, we'd sing. We were always singing. I was learning songs at my dad and mom's knee. Music in the 50s for me was family community music. I realized the power of music to bring people together. In the 60s, I began to get involved in the coffee house movement. And I then realized I experienced music and began to play music as a means of communicating within our movement, buoying up the movement of the stories that kept us going. And it also communicated to the outside world what we were about. That was the 60s. And I also began writing songs in 1965. In the, where am I? In the 70s, I applied what I had learned concerning civil rights to the disability rights movement. And I began to be the troubadour, especially for the 504 demonstration, which I'll tell you about in another show. All these are just tidbits that will develop later on.
On to the 80s.
In the 80s, I realized that children with disabilities had no music. They couldn't hear a song and say, that's me in that song, or I identify with that. Well, I began writing songs for those kids and I began performing, but I quickly realized that it wasn't just children with disabilities, it was all devalued differences. Whenever there's a difference that's devalued, for example, it was the one African-American kid in a white school district, or the one white kid in an African-American school district, or the Native American kid in the school district where he was alone in the Midwest.
Okay, moving along now to the 90s.
In the 90s, Christy keeps me on the ball and moving forward in all aspects of life, particularly now. In the 90s, I lost a job that I thought was bulletproof. I'll tell you about that later. I was an administrator in a blindness agency. I was fired because I was too progressive. And
so, what did you do?
I had to figure out what to do. And I began to play music in schools. And I realized there was a need for it. Character education was a matter of consequence in all schools. So I was writing songs and developing materials for schools that taught children about acceptance of those who are different, about love, forgiveness, and service, about ending exclusion, ridicule, and violence, all the things that were alive in schools then and now.
How many states did you travel to, Jeff?
I worked in 47 states and 5 other countries before 2001.
Well, we had to get right. So into the next decade now, the 2000s, things really changed. First of all, in the beginning of the decade for you, as a musician in schools.
Yeah.
And you'll explain that. But then toward the
what happened was No Child Left Behind passed, or what we like to call No Child Left Untested. And what that did was it took all character education out of schools and all the arts for the most part. And in a matter of 6 weeks, I lost all contracts were canceled and all purchase of my materials ended. And I found myself in need of another focus. I worked in museums, but musically, in 1995, a North Star had been turned on concerning hospice. And as my consciousness evolved, and I realized that early on, I was ashamed of my disability. I tried to hide it. I thought if people knew about that, that was reason enough not to want to be my friend. So I hid my disability. Then I met another guy who also had low vision.
When I was were you then?
18.
Okay.
I began to lose vision when I was 5. I was amazed I liked him anyway, because I had so devalued myself that it was a light bulb moment that I could like him anyway, therefore people might like me in spite of my disability. When I began working with other people with visual disabilities, I had an opportunity to develop a summer program for teens and young people with all range of visual disabilities. Now I thought, aha, I am really like all of them. I share the commonality of a visual disability. Then I went, it's a long story, we'll get to it another time. But yes, when I went to Berkeley and I began to see other students with all disabilities, not all, but I expanded my understanding to disability as really a political construct. Now I saw myself as a member of the broad community of people with disabilities.
Okay, let's fast forward, stay in the 2000s.
Yeah, I'm at that point.
Okay.
I wanted to cover that quickly.
Good.
I realized that, okay, what is it? How can I be of service? And what's my greater mission, if you will, a musical mission? And I saw that as working with people in hospice who are approaching end of life, or their family members. They were grieving their family members before and after their passing. So I began to volunteer in hospice, and my music then took this broader idea of music for everybody, because we will all face that time in our lives. So then came 2010, and that was a mighty turning point in my life in many ways. A dear friend of mine, I had followed the story of his daughter who had lupus, and I knew she needed a kidney in order to survive. I was her same blood type. I had to volunteer for testing and agreed to commit to giving a kidney, and I made that step. And I volunteered, I gave the kidney, and it was an extremely difficult surgery. That's for another show. And then I was attacked. There was an attack on my life. And those two things tore all those tender healings apart, the attack. And I wound up flat on my back for 6 months, and I wasn't getting better.
So this is from June 2010 to the end.
To the end of 2010, right. And Christy and I had worked together in 2001, and we had a common friend who had actually hired us both for that job. And she would keep us abreast of what each other were doing. And she said, I was coming out here to see my new grandson and my first grandchild. And boy, getting on that airplane when I hadn't been able to even sit up or walk comfortably around the block, that was quite a flight. I got off, and Christy, she suggested Christy and I began communicating 10 days before the flight and realized that we had a lot in common. And when Christy saw me, she wept because I had lost 30 pounds and I knew that the life force was leaving me. I was dying. I knew my spirit was dying. And when Christy met me and wept, we fell in love. And the rest is our history.
Which is for another show.
For another show. But over the last 10 years, I finished my memoir, which was a mighty lift, Grit. I then finished, or at the same time, finished my hospice album, completed it with a string trio,
And the name
Peace,
of
Sweet,
that is?
Peace, Sweet Peace.
Mhm.
And I wrote a book of short stories, which is yet to be published. So, but I had been saying to Christy, how do I get my music back into the world? How do I get my all the music I have
Your work.
produced, my body of work, how do I get it back in the world? And then COVID happened. And because of COVID, we lost our administrative assistant who was coming into our office. She had 2 people die in her family. And we didn't want strangers coming into, not strangers, but people coming into the house. So I found a virtual assistant. And Susan is friends and a member of the Set of the Sales Network. And she and Bill, the producer of Set of the Sales, approached me and said, we'd like you to do a show.
All right.
And
so
here we are.
Tell us about your show's focus.
Okay. People first consciousness. Signal. And assuming that we're moving forward, I'll continue.
I'm getting.
Oh, but wait, we have an incoming message.
Yes. People first consciousness.
Here we go. People first consciousness. That idea came to me because of 2 things. One, we have become such a divided and fractious nation, and there's so much negativity. I know that there is the need for love and kindness, particularly kindness. So I thought, well, people first consciousness would be a good way to present that. We all, here's one of my premise. We all have a right to name ourselves. And we believe that as a culture. We believe that as a nation. We believe that as a world. For example, we now refer to people who are African American or people who are Black. In the 60s, in the civil rights movement I was a part of, the polite language was Negro. But people who are African American said, no, please don't call us Negroes, call us African Americans or Blacks. And just like that, it changed. Then in the 70s, the women's movement said, wait a minute, girls at the office, we're adult women, call us women. And why male men? Or why servicemen? Why not male people or my male lady or my male woman, however we want to say it? People have a right to name themselves. And that has followed suit with all manner of people in different groups in our culture, except for people with disabilities. In the 60s, we began to say there is a difference between a disability and a handicap. A disability is a medical measurable fact. It's something that is a reality about us. I have a visual disability. I have a hearing disability. I have a physical disability. And the handicap is the barrier, the limitation. It can be attitudinal or physical. If I am using my wheelchair and we come to a flight of stairs, that environment is handicapping for me. So the mantra is people have disabilities, situations create handicaps. And your attitude might be a handicap to another person if you present a barrier to hiring or to friendship or to whatever inclusion. So in the 70s, people with disabilities created the notion of people first language, which means I am so glad that in my audience are men and women and teens and children, some of whom might have disabilities. If I said, I am so glad that there are those that the disabled are among my audience. Well, that's grouping people by that one characteristic. So people first language says, I have I don't, but I have a granddaughter who lights up the room when she comes in. She has a wonderful love of music. And if I need to, I say, and she has Down syndrome. I don't have that granddaughter. I'm just making that up as an example. Rather than saying, I have a Down syndrome granddaughter. She's not defined by that. That's one attribute. Now, I am blind. There's no doubt about it. I can say to you, I'm a blind man. That's my choice of language. Because basically, I'm a broken down, beaten up, gray hair blind man. The first words I sang on the show. So people first language is a thing unto itself. People first consciousness is this. On this show, you will never hear anyone disparaged about in any regard. However, it is very common to hear even the most conscious commentators say someone was such an idiot. The words, the N word, of course, what you see me doing sign language, the N word, of course, everyone knows what that is. The R word was a movement among people with cognitive disabilities and their advocates and families to say, stop using the word retarded at all. It's the R word. So if you really, occasionally I hear people use it and I will write them a note, give them a call. I get on them. I said, no, don't. However, there are other words that haven't yet gotten into that lexicon of off limits. And I would like to suggest to you that idiot, imbecile, and moron are words that it would be best if we never use them again. My brother, God bless my brother, when he was 9 years old, he was institutionalized because of his cognitive disability. That's a show unto itself. For 19 years, he lived in a place that you and I wouldn't want to spend a half hour in. And as you enter the gate, it said, a big concrete sign, Columbus State Institution for Morons, Imbeciles, and Idiots. At the turn of the last century, those were medical terms that defined varying degrees of cognitive disability. However, that sign remained, and the words remain in our language as hate speech. They're hate speech. If you can think about it from the standpoint of what we're saying when we call someone an idiot is we're saying they're behaving as if in our minds they are not at our intellectual level. They are behaving in a way that suggests that they're not, as my father used to say, they're not using their head for anything more than a hat rack. So idiot, imbecile, and moron, we're not going to use it. Please don't use it. Also crazy, nuts, anything that relates to people who have a history of mental illness. And again, people have a right to name themselves. I'd need to find what is the best way to refer to people who have a history of mental illness. Any of you in that field or who have that condition, that disability, please let me know.
Okay, so I think we're ready to go to our next segment.
Which is
we're going to put you to work, Jeff. You're going to be singing about people that are survivors?
We are survivors. I'll tell you why. Okay. Ukulele,
Harmonica?
brace, yes.
Do you need to take your bow tie loose, or are you going to be
No,
okay?
I'll be fine.
All right. Wait a minute. Check on. Waiting for Susan. Tell us about what you have on your neck and about your ukulele.
Well, this is a harmonica brace so that I can play the ukulele, or I would be playing the guitar, but there's not enough room. So I'm going to be playing the harmonica and this beautiful 8-string ukulele my son gave me, which has the ring of a 12-string guitar, really. Let me check the tuning, please.
Oh, okay.
I was asked to play play at a conference for people who had experienced traumatic brain injury, which is the leading cause of their.
Well, they didn't used to survive.
In 1970, 90% of people with who had had traumatic brain injuries died. By 1990, 90% lived. And this was during the 90s that I was asked. And when I researched who that community is, what they're about, first thing I read was that they refer to themselves as survivors. Well, so I wrote this song, We Are Survivors. Well, you know, in the last year, in this year of COVID, all of us have become survivors. We have survived the loss of contact with our family. Maybe we've lost our job. Maybe we've lost loved ones to COVID. Maybe we ourselves have had COVID and we are still experiencing the losses that live on with us. All of us have experienced loss, but all of us have experienced loss, period. We've all lost loved ones. We've all lost relationships. We've all lost jobs, likely, or some of us have. We have lost, in many ways, we've become survivors. So after I wrote this song, I learned that women who had had breast cancer refer to themselves as survivors. People who've survived cancer for 5 years call themselves survivors. Parents who've had children who died of violent deaths refer to themselves as survivors. People who have been institutionalized in mental hospitals refer to themselves as survivors. So the word is common among many, many groups of people who identify with that loss, that they've lived beyond it. And in this time of coming out of COVID, as we slowly come back, we can all identify with this. I'll sing this song now, and please join me. It's an easy song to learn.
So tell us how we join you. You're going to tell us what to sing next. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a very simple song. I'll sing it once. We are survivors. We are survivors. We are survivors. And we're moving on. We are survivors and we're moving on. The second verse, our path is turning and we're moving on. Third verse, we are courageous. Fourth verse, we are united. We are victorious. We are survivors.
And you'll cue us, right? And I'm going to sing along here.
Yeah, I'll throw out the next few words. I will.
Great.
Okay.
And we hope everyone that feels like it will join us with this song.
Please
Here we
do.
go.
are survivors. We are survivors. We are survivors. And we're moving on. Our path is turning. Our path is turning. Our path is turning. Our path is turning. And we're moving on. We are survivors. We are survivors. We are survivors. We are survivors. And we're moving on. We are courageous. We are courageous. We are courageous. We are courageous. And we're moving on. We are united. We are united. We are united. We are united. And we're moving on. For we are survivors. We are. We are victorious. We are victorious. We are victorious. We are victorious. And we're moving on. For we are survivors. We are survivors. We are survivors. And we're moving on. And we're moving on. And we're moving on.
Well, thank you, Jeff. That's one of your, 500 songs that you've written?
I think 600 today.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
600.
and counting.
Thank you very much. And we're getting ready for the next segment, which is Music is the Message.
Music is the message. Diana, hello, my friend.
Hi, I am so excited to be sharing this special day with you, the inaugural broadcast of the Jeff Moyer Show. Congratulations.
Thank you, Diana. And I really appreciate you agreeing to be our first short guest. You will be our regular interview in a few weeks, but for now, thanks for calling.
You're welcome. Do you know why I'm so excited about this, Jeff?
Well, because
Let me tell you.
Okay,
Let me
please,
tell you.
tell me.
First of all, let me say that I've considered you my friend for about 20 years or so, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Do you remember how we met?
I do remember, but go
You
ahead,
do?
please.
Yeah, I was an elementary school chorus teacher looking for some music that would lend itself to teaching my students about diversity appreciation, including disability. And in my search, my Google search, my quest, I came upon you, Jeff Moyer. And so after that, my inclusive chorus sang many of your songs for our performances. We spread your messages of inclusion to audiences wherever we performed. But even more, your music instilled a message of inclusion in the hearts of chorus members and their classmates. And do you remember at one time we performed together? We actually had the opportunity to do a joint keynote performance here in San Diego at the Kids Included Together conference.
I do remember that.
Yeah, well, so do my students. I promise you they still remember that because you were a rock star. You were a celebrity in their eyes, and they were so excited to get to meet you in person. It was such a fun day of making memories and friendships, Jeff. And ever since then, I've been blown away by what I have learned about you and your history and your passion for inclusion, equity, and disability rights. And I don't know if your viewers know this, but not only were you the troubadour of disability, of the disability rights movement, playing your guitar and harmonica and creating songs that kept the protesters motivated and encouraged during the 504 demonstrations, but you also sang after the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and your ADA anthem has been played and shared for many landmark anniversary celebrations of the ADA, including the 30th anniversary of the ADA last year. So you've made such a huge contribution to the disability rights movement.
Thank you, Diana.
You're welcome. Well, thank you. And also, I don't know if they know this, but you worked on ending institutionalization, and your poignant music has been featured in many projects related to deinstitutionalization and community inclusion.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Wow, Diana, that's wonderful that you've been.
Well, I'm not done. There's more. You also, and this is what really touches my heart, Jeff. Not only did you donate a kidney to somebody who you loved, but you also played a significant role in getting Mark, your brother, out of an institution. And you wrote a book, like you mentioned earlier, called Grit. And I have my copy right here in front of me with some pages tabbed that I read and loved. But it's about you and your family's journey toward inclusive lives of quality. And that's something that I'm really familiar with and that I love about you. So I just have to say thank you for who you have been and who you continue to be in this world, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you for using your talent of music and your understanding of the disability experience as a teaching tool for children and towards fostering better connections in our hearts and minds between diversity and disability.
Yes.
I love your work.
Thank
I
you.
love you.
Thank
And
you.
that's why I'm excited that you're doing this show.
Well, thank you. And I love you as well. And you will, as I said, be a featured guest shortly. And we're going to go in depth in your story, which I'm not even going to begin to talk about now. But it is, in many ways, it's mine as well.
You're one of the people I call sheroes.
Yes,
thank
you are our
Thank you,
shero.
Christy.
Yes.
All right. Well, I
You are
look forward
shero.
to it, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank
and
you,
I'll
Diana.
be
Thank
watching you.
you for your call
Okay,
in.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. Oh, wasn't that nice?
That was
Gee,
wonderful.
yeah,
Now we do have a different segment coming up
yeah.
called
Music corner?
Instrument Corner.
Instrument corner.
Yes.
Okay, instrument corner. Coming up.
Here we go. Tell them what instruments you're highlighting here, Jeff.
I will.
The flute family. Right?
I will. The Native American flute family. But let me first say that as I was beginning to go blind when I was 5, my parents were told by an optometrist that I was pretending I couldn't see. So he told my parents told the piano teacher, and a year and a half into lessons, which I had been memorizing to master the song, not being able to see the music, because he said, back proper sight of boy's distance. So 18 inches away I was. When he learned, I said, sight reading. Today we start sight reading. I said, I really can't see the music. He said, therefore I can no longer teach you. Well, I didn't realize it, but what happened was during those piano lessons, I was intuitively beginning to understand that if I could hear it, I could play it. So it began in me a desire to play. Well, I didn't know. Over my lifetime, as I have loved music and picked up new instruments, I've taught myself to play them by ear without instruction.
And how many are they? How many instruments do you play?
Oh, depends on how you count, about 20.
All right.
And this is an instrument that our Carlos Nakai, who is the great exemplar of Native American flute players, said that this is a music that is played from the heart because there is no written music for it. So anyone who plays it from their soul. And this is a tiny one that I bought from a trading post on a native reservation where we stop on our long distance travel to see our children. And I believe it's made by the Menominee tribe. Anyway, their company is called High Spirit Flutes. And this is the smallest one I have. Beautiful little thing. And it's easy to carry. I keep it in my harmonica box. Okay.
Next,
The
is
big one.
the big guy. All right, here you go.
Now, I have another one like this that I couldn't put my hands on straight away that is made by the Navajo people. This again is made by the Menominee tribe, High Spirit. It's the largest Native American flute I have. And it's got, I'll play it for you and then I'll show you something unique about this instrument. The other flute I mentioned, the Navajo flute, which is made of aromatic cedar, and this flute have in common what I call a ghost note. Listen to this. That's a high note. Just something unusual about this instrument, but I love it for its depth. It's got such a rich low end. When I play this, I sort of feel it in my solar plexus. So that is another.
All right, here's a.
Now this is one of my favorites. Well, they're all my favorites, but this is two flutes in one. As you can see, they're joined, and you blow both flutes at the same time. The one just plays a drone note. It sounds like this.
Now the big boy. There you
go. Okay. Oh yes. This is three flutes in one, and you actually finger two of them, or you can if you choose different ways to play it. And when
turn you this way a little bit.
COVID began, I decided it was a good time to try to figure out how to play this one.
Yes.
Now I will tell you that
the last flute,
although all tribes have flutes of various types, I believe that they are called courting flutes. And the notion is, if you wanted to court a lady, a Native American young woman, you would have to go away from the village, make a flute, write her a song, and come back and take her away from the village and play it for her. Because these were considered so seductive that you wouldn't play them in the village, lest who knows what would happen. So this instrument was given to me by a Native American friend who was a Lakota Sioux tribe member by the name of Kevin Stockton. He was also blind. His story I'll tell later, but he gave this to me. This was made by the best flute maker among the Lakota Sioux, and it is made from the heart of an ancient redwood tree.
It's a little long, so we're gonna adjust the mic here. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Christy.
That was just one of his 250 instruments, right?
Well, we gave away a number before we moved that might be down to 200, but I've collected instruments since I was a boy, and I now have this vast collection. And we decided it would be fun, as I used to do in assemblies, that every show I would highlight a different family of instruments.
Right. So we'll continue this into our next show, which does bring us, sadly, to the end of this show. So I know you want to talk to the audience about signing off.
Yes.
And also announce that we're looking for.
Yes. And you know the email they send to you, right? Do you recall it? I forget it.
The email.
Yeah, they communicate to outreach. Okay.
Outreach,
Yes.
right.
So now I
got you. Okay.
Yeah, I am really, I thought this show was going to be difficult. And in fact, it was easy and a joy because of Christy, her prompting, her encouragement, and all the folks I've spoken to that have wished me well and rooted me forward. And because of the belief of Bill and Susan and Set of the Sales Network.
And the wonderful
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And each and every one of you who've tuned in. Now, as Christy said at the top of the show, we believe in accessibility. We believe in inclusion, and we are going to be moving toward, oh, you know what you never did was describe the room.
I realize that, but do you know what? We can do that next show.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, let's suffice to say it's full of my instruments, hither and yon.
Right.
And I'm wearing, for those of you who are blind, I have silver hair, and I'm wearing a dark blue shirt with a black bow tie with musical symbols on it and silver cufflinks. And Christy, you're wearing all black and a purple vest.
Exactly.
And you also have silver hair.
Right, I do.
Yeah, we are often.
We are the elders.
We are elders. We are. So we've been looking for an ASL interpreter who would also lip sync for our accessible music videos that we're working on. And we also would like an ASL interpreter who would lip sync for this show. So if any of you know of an ASL interpreter who is different than me, we're looking for diversity. We're looking for a woman, and particularly a woman who is not white, who would be an ASL interpreter, a person of color. And any of you who know such a person, please let us know.
Outreach.
Oh, and send all ideas about ways to make the show more inclusive, ideas you have about how to improve the show, and particularly ideas about if you know that magic interpreter. Please send any ideas to outreach@jeffmoyer.com. OUTREACH, one word, outreach at one word, all lowercase, Jeff Moyer, JEFFMOYER.com. And I'm going to close with this simple message. Number one, at the beginning of this holy time for Christians and for Jews, may this be a time of elevation for all of us. And as we begin to heal the fractures in our nation, and even sometimes in our families, and for each and every one of us who are survivors, may peace, sweet peace, be with you. And thanks for tuning in.